it's in chaos this morning. That is the Coalition. Senior Nationals who defied shadow cabinet to oppose hate speech laws are putting the ball now in Susan Ley's court. Ross Cadell telling us just last hour that he will resign if requested by the opposition leader. Let's go live to Trudy McIntosh now. Trudy, this is a big test for Susan Ley.
It certainly is. Extraordinary scenes here in Canberra this morning. Senior members of Susan Ley's shadow cabinet musing about their future. Ross Cadell seemed resigned to his fate last hour here on AM Agenda, saying he expects to be sacked by the opposition leader Susan Ley after he, Bridget McKenzie and Susan McDonald all defied the shadow cabinet position and voted no last night on the hate speech laws. The broad expectation, even among Liberals, was that their Nationals colleagues would abstain on the vote. That is essentially a way through without having to vote yes, but by voting no, they have breached this convention that's known as shadow cabinet solidarity. Have a look at how the vote played out last night. The three shadow ministers who are in the gun now of Susan Ley this morning, the Nationals met their party room as we go to where the Liberal leadership team meeting to discuss the fate of these three Nationals shadow ministers. Ross Cadell, last hour on Sky News, pretty clear, if Susan Ley asks him to resign, he will.
Will you stand down?
If I am still a member of the shadow cabinet next week, it is because of the understanding, the tolerance and the leadership of Susan Ley. I understand if you do the crime, you have to take the time. And if it is so requested, I will be stepping down from shadow cabinet. Yeah.
But if Susan Ley sacks you, you accept that?
I am willing to resign. I have prepared to resign. There is a conversation taking place that is not at my level. This was done solemnly and for the right reasons, and I will wear the consequences of that as I should, as more politicians should in this place, is stand up and take your pain when you do the wrong thing. And if I have done that, I will go without a question. I will support the Coalition. I will support Susan Ley. But if it does,
you don't think you will be allowed to stay?
No, I don't think I will. But I think if I am, it shows a tolerance of the Liberals, a tolerance of Susan Ley.
I want to take you into a few of the schools of thought being thrown around by Liberals I've spoken to today. One is that they believe they have to stand by this cabinet solidarity rule, that to break it now means in the future any sort of shadow minister will feel emboldened to be able to cross the floor, and that just makes things incredibly complicated. But on the other hand, there's a school of thought that to sack these three Nationals ministers from the Senate, that this potentially blows up the Coalition once again, and nobody wants to see a repeat of that messy divorce we saw for a couple of days in the wake of the election defeat. Bridget McKenzie is the Nationals Senate leader. She voted no, weighing up her future too. I spoke to her a short time ago earlier in Parliament.
And it's
have
not
you
just
breached
the
shadow
National
cabinet
Party.
solidarity, Bridget?
The National Party is not the only party in Parliament, not the only Australians that have had concerns with the Prime Minister's
that's
approach.
not my question. Will you be tendering your resignation today after breaching shadow cabinet solidarity?
I'm very aware of the conventions of Parliament and I will be doing what I've always done, is trying to do my very best to conduct my career here with integrity.
Are you daring Susan Ley to sack you?
I've answered your question, Trudy. Thanks.
Right, so as Ross told us, he believed there was a high-level leadership meeting going on to discuss their future. Any idea who's in that meeting for a start, and when that might be concluded, or when we'll hear from the leaders?
Yeah, well, no word on when we're going to hear from the leaders. As far as you hear, there may be plans to get up, there may not. Yesterday we thought we'd heard from Susan Ley, we never did. But in terms of who's in this Liberal meeting, this is the inner circle around Susan Ley. It includes people from the right of the party, power brokers like James Patterson and Jonathan Duniam. They're moderates as well, like Anne Ruston in the room. They're the ones who have to thrash out what is a difficult issue. Follow the rules and kick out three of your shadow ministers, or show some leniency. The Shadow Attorney General earlier, Laura, said publicly that he believed that there was a case that this was an extraordinary circumstance and that there could be some wiggle room, a public argument that, well, the Prime Minister rushed the whole thing, so that's why it's been messy and that's why they voted no. I think that's more complicated because their own leader, David Littleproud, he abstained in the House. That was the leader's position. in the Senate, a different thing happened.
Yeah, I think so as well. So against his own leader as well, over and then voting, crossing the floor. I think what is clear here as well is, you know, we've been forever talking about Sussan Ley's leadership since she became leader. But what this whole summer and episode has exposed, even though she was getting, you know, political traction, a lot of support from the Jewish community, her authority just isn't there. And I don't think it ever was.
And the question is whether she went too far, Laura, in immediately calling for these proposals to be put before Parliament to tackle anti-Semitism, to go down the path of what would have always, to me, seemed to be a difficult issue for her party room. How do you curb anti-Semitic hatred at the same time as having free speech protections? It was clear last week her party room would not go with her down that path of negotiating on that. When she called the bill unsalvageable, that seemed to be the point at which there was never going to be a pathway through on racial vilification. But as you say, I think she comes through the summer wounded. That last year there was a lot of attempts privately behind the scenes, a lot of ruction internally about her numbers. Still there for now, but it's been a pretty difficult week for her.
It certainly has. Trudy, the Prime Minister, also in a media conference this morning, I think called almost entirely to amplify this division among the coalition. Obviously, he had to answer some questions about his own side too, but he's walking away entirely from the racial vilification proposal from his special envoy.
I thought today the Prime Minister essentially is drawing a line under all of this now. This is the package that's passed Parliament to tackle anti-Semitism, despite the calls from some Jewish leaders, including Peter Wertheim from ECAJ, a leading Jewish organisation, to continue to work on racial vilification proposals that were abandoned. The Prime Minister is not committing to doing that one bit. He wants to move on from this issue. He does not believe that there'll be any sort of change in the Senate numbers that would allow him to even contemplate this. I put it to the Prime Minister earlier. Members of your own backbench want you to continue to work on this. Can you commit to doing that you could take time to get the detail of this right, and that might actually change the numbers in the Senate?
I commit to trying to get every state to elect 6 Labor senators, but that's unlikely. The Senate is what it is there, and if you can't get support for these laws in the aftermath of a massacre, it is difficult to see people changing their mind.
You detect that the Prime Minister wants to try and turn the page now, Laura. He went on to talk about the fact that they have a big agenda. They want that to be the focus of the parliamentary year, not to spend the year bogged down in the details of this fight about free speech versus hate speech. So it seems like it's not going to happen.
No, it will not. Trudy, thank you.